Well, Kerry, great to connect with you and excited about this documentary, Healing Humanity, the Power of a Proper Human Diet, something I've been teaching for a long time. And you have an amazing personal story. So please share that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Jockers, for having me on here. It's an honor. Yeah, I'd love to share my story. So I guess just to go back, I'm 44 years old right now, and for most of my adult life, I suffered with just horrible clinical depression and anxiety. And besides that, a whole host of other health issues. So at my heaviest, I was 100 pounds heavier than I am today. But I was diagnosed with so many health issues, and they just sort of one on top of the other. They kept growing, started taking more and more medication. First, it was IBS, stomach issues. My stomach was just always bubbling and gurgling, and it was hurting me after every meal. That was the first thing for me. And then I started getting trouble sleeping. I would snore at night. I went in for a sleep study, and they diagnosed me with sleep apnea. I had to start using a CPAP machine. My appendix burst on the operating room table. Thankfully, I was on the operating room table
Ooh.
because it could have taken me out otherwise. I had multiple kidney stones. I had skin cancer on my ear. I had arthritis really bad. I never really knew it was arthritis. My lower back just hurt for years and years, and I thought that's just some foolish injury I had from high school. I'm just always going to have that sort of thing. But before I found a proper human diet, I was diagnosed with gout in my foot, and it was incredibly painful. Like I mentioned, I had kidney stones, and those were one of the worst pains I've ever been through, but the gout was horrible. It felt like a fractured bone. It hurt so bad for about 18 months before I found a proper human diet. Anytime I go to the grocery store or shopping, I'd use one of those mobility scooters. I just couldn't put any pressure down on the foot. They gave me injections, they tried all sorts of medications, and nothing ever helped with that. And I had so many health issues, so I could go on forever. The last thing I'll say is about 8 years ago, I was at home, and I was on the couch watching TV, and I went to stand up, and I just got very dizzy, and I couldn't find my words, and the side of my face went numb, and my wife is like, "What is going on?" And she ended up calling 911, and I suffered a TIA mini stroke,
Hmm.
and I had to take an ambulance, and I spent 5 days at the stroke unit in the hospital. Thankfully, the symptoms I had, although I had some that lingered and I had to do physical therapy for, nothing was permanent. However, they're like, man, what is wrong with this guy? At that time, I was in my late 30s, and all of these health issues, he's having a mini stroke. So they did all these tests on me, and they tested my heart. And actually, I had a heart catheter done. I had echoes done on my heart, and they determined I had congestive heart failure. And my ejection fraction was 44. I had just a really high, rapid heartbeat, and they diagnosed me with congestive heart failure, and they put me on more medication for the congestive heart failure. And then the other thing, real quick, is my entire life since birth, I've had an irregular heartbeat. I mean, I've probably worn 20 or 25 of those heart monitors. I remember in kindergarten, it was like this huge vest. Like two years ago when I had it, it was just like this little thing. But I've always had this highly erratic heartbeat, and that was one of the biggest things is the congestive heart failure. I would stand up and I would just get dizzy and I'd get fatigued. And I always show people this, but at one point I was on all of this
Wow.
medication. Uh,
Yeah, if
Most
you're
of it was,
listening, he probably had, I don't know, 20 bottles in there,
yeah,
15, 20 pill bottles.
15 or 20 bottles on there. And most of it was for depression, anxiety, but it was for all of those issues I just
Mm.
mentioned. And the crazy thing was, in retrospect, some of these pills I took for 10 years. None of them ever fixed it. Like I just kept getting more
Hmm.
issues and then more pills and then side effects and more pills, and none of it ever fixed it. Uh, so that's kind of my journey. And then about 600 days ago, I learned about a proper human diet. For me, that's a carnivore diet. I learned from a man named Dante Ferrigno. He was doing a YouTube video, and he was talking about, I'm just going to eat meat. And I'm like, this guy's insane. You can't just eat meat. However, I had learned about the ketogenic diet about 10 years prior. I watched a documentary on Netflix, and I tried it, and it actually worked for me. And it was the only thing I've ever done my whole life, besides all those pills I showed you, that I really had this, whoa, something's happening here moment. I yo-yoed on keto. I couldn't maintain it. I would lose a bunch of weight. At one point, I lost 60 pounds. I felt incredible. My wife lost a bunch of weight too. And I remember we're like, never again am I going to gain all this weight back. I figured it out. And then I went back to eating in moderation and I gained all that weight back and I gained
Mm.
more back. But when I saw Dante Ferrigno talking about this carnivore thing, I'm like, that's just a strict ketogenic diet. I understand the biology and the science. That will work, but it's insane. You can't just eat meat. You're going to clog your I got congestive heart failure. I'm going to have a heart attack. I'm going to get bored. What about fiber? What about vegetables? None of that will work. And long story short, I noticed that that video from Dante was 2 years old. And so my wife and I were watching this on TV on YouTube. I'm like, let's fast forward. I was really cynical. I'm like, there's no way he's still doing this. And I went to his most recent video. So this is 2 years later. He lost like 80 pounds. His face, he looked like a different human. He just had a big smile on his face. And so many of the issues that I had, Dante overcame, including the IBS and depression, anxiety, mental health issues, things like that. So that was sort of the turning point for me. And I decided to, actually, I didn't decide to start like a carnivore diet at that point. I watched a whole bunch of videos and did a whole bunch of research. Dr. Ken Berry, Dr. Anthony Chafee. I found Dr. Philip Ovadia that was really helpful for me because my big concern was my heart. And this guy's a heart surgeon that's pretty much eating carnivore diet for 11 years now and advocating for it. And then eventually I started carnivore from there.
Yeah. And what kind of results, like, how did you feel as you started it?
It was incredible. I try not to overhype it and I tell people,
Yeah.
everybody's different. But the big thing for me was I stopped snoring almost immediately.
Mm.
And subsequently, I have learned because I love doing research on this. I think like it empowers me to do this was the research and getting over the fear of it. I heard Jordan Peterson on Joe Rogan say he stopped snoring week one doing a carnivore diet. And subsequently, I've heard so many other people say this. And now, when I was diagnosed with sleep apnea, I hated that CPAP machine. Oh man, I want to take a baseball bat to it. I used that thing for
Mm.
years and I despised it. But my sleep doctor told me, listen, Kerry, you're way overweight. Like you maybe thing that was so encouraging when I stopped snoring throughout the years when I'd done keto, I stopped snoring every now and then. And whenever that would happen, my depression, anxiety, the subsequent days would be lessened, like noticeable, but then it'd always come back. But I believe there's a big tie-in between our snoring. I believe there's a lot of downstream effects other than, oh, I'm just getting a better night's sleep. No, I think my immune system's stronger. Maybe my hormones are working a little bit better. I think there's a lot of effects from it. So when I stopped snoring, I got really excited. And then a couple of weeks into it, I think about week three, my anxiety, I was horribly anxious. It was just going away. It was like more so than any of the medications had ever done. Uh, the arthritis I had in my foot, that took a lot longer. That was around 70 days on carnivore. But around day 30, it was life changing. I'm like, I stopped snoring. My anxiety's going away. My IBS, by day 30, my IBS, like my stomach, I remember saying at one point to my wife, I'm like, I don't even feel my stomach. This is the weirdest thing. It's always been this heavy, bloated feeling. It feels
Mm.
like air, like there's nothing there now. And I'm like, I wonder if this is how I was supposed to feel my entire life. And it's just because I was putting so much stuff in there that I shouldn't have, that it was always bloated and bothering me. But that IBS that I tried everything, the low FODMAP diet, all sorts of different diets and medications and everything, that was gone by day 30. And so I've been doing YouTube for about 9 years. My wife and I have a little homestead. We have triplets plus one. We own our small town movie theater. I'm in the basement of it. So we got all these weird projects I've been doing YouTube about. So on day 30, I'm like, I'm going to do one video talking about this carnivore experience for 30 days and how it's literally, I feel like it saved my life. My depression was so bad and it was going away. And I knew if I stuck with it, it'd go away completely. So I did one video, 30 days later on carnivore diet or something like that. And it just went crazy. It went viral, which is great. But the comments I got, I'm like, there's so many other people doing this. I thought I was a weirdo and Dante was a
Mm.
weirdo. These people eating only meat. And I was hearing from people in their 70s and 80s that are saying they have their mobility back. This one gentleman, 83, he's a veteran and he was depressed for decades and decades. And he said, for the first time, I've had 0 dark episodes, and I'm no longer depressed. I'm happy for the first time on carnivore. And he'd been doing it for like 2 years. I got all these comments from people doing this for multiple years, and I just got really fired up about it, kept doing the diet myself, and then I started talking more about it on YouTube and interviewing individuals on YouTube to share their story.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I've heard a lot of other stories of people doing really well on carnivore. And when I look at nutrition, I think about it like a bell curve. It's kind of like when we think about fiber, there are some people that thrive on very low fiber or no fiber diets, and there's some people that seem to do really well on really high fiber. And most people are kind of somewhere in the middle, maybe shifted a little more towards low fiber, maybe shifted a little more towards high fiber. The way you know is to experiment, right? And so you're somebody that does really well on low fiber diet. I do well kind of low to moderate level of fiber. Too much fiber, FODMAPs, I get bloated, right? But some plant foods I seem to do really, really well with, and fruit and things like that. And you got to kind of find your sweet spot. And so for you, you found that in that carnivore, with that carnivore style diet. So I always tell people, if you're not feeling great, you got nothing to lose. Experiment, right? Experiment with these types of things. And I know that's what you're doing with your documentary, is really exposing people to this, and to this sort of lifestyle, and just really helping people make good, healthy choices for their life. And I want to touch on the snoring too. That's really key, because and snoring and sleep apnea, snoring is kind of the first symptom, right? If you are a chronic snorer, it's the first symptom. If somebody tells you that, you should get a sleep study, because if you have sleep apnea, your brain is slowly dying at night. You're not getting enough oxygen. And so it can't produce enough energy. The mitochondria become old, damaged, what we call senescent. And then that's going to lead to more brain inflammation, which is going to result in depression, anxiety, right? Poor cognitive function, brain fog, lots of different things like that you were dealing with. So as you stopped snoring, you were getting more oxygen into those neurons and regenerating those neurons. And then, of course, your mental illnesses, improved dramatically, right? And you felt so much better. So yeah, super critical stuff. Now, you also implemented, did you implement any sort of intermittent fasting or fasting with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Sort of naturally at first, because one interesting thing with carnivore is I'm eating fatty cuts of meat. I get full a lot quicker. I think a lot of people, myself included, when I heard about this carnivore, I'm like, how am I going to be able to afford eating meat 3 times a day? And I was going at it from the mindset of the standard American diet, where I was eating 3 meals a day and snacks in between. A lot of times on my carnivore journey, I'll eat once or twice a day. In fact, for a stretch of about 60 days, I ate 1 meal a day. And I wasn't starving myself. It wasn't forced. It was completely
Mm-hmm.
natural. I just wasn't hungry. So I'd fast for 23 hours. I also did a 3 day fast and a 5 day fast. And later, I became good friends with a gentleman who sadly has passed in the meantime, Jeff DeProsperous. He was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and he became really good friends with me. He was doing a carnivore diet. His chemotherapy was a lot more bearable. He felt like he was younger. His energy was improved. But he also follows Professor Thomas Seyfried, and fasting is a
Mm.
big part of what Professor Seyfried promotes or advocates for. And so he had done 50 5 day fasts. He would do
Wow.
carnivore diet, and then he would fast for 5 days, and he'd get chemo in the middle of it. And so he had one day where he's going to say, Kerry, I'm going to try to do an 8 day fast because I got this big scan coming up. We're going to starve the cancer cells. I'm going to get into deep ketosis. There's all sorts of other benefits of fasting. And so I said, Jeff, I'm become good friends with you. I want to do this with you. So I did the 8 day fast with Jeff. It's so counterintuitive. Like, I'm very passionate about fasting. I have a lot to learn about it since then, just as an individual, but I've never felt better in my life. And I was doing a challenge. So I would do pull-ups, which is something I never did. I never exercised before finding carnivore, before basically healing my body, but I did pull-ups maxed out every day. And by day 8, I did more pull-ups I've ever done my entire life, more than I did on day 7, day 6, day
Mm.
5. I'm like, how is this even possible? I'm not eating anything.
Mm-hmm.
I felt almost euphoric on day 8. I am not a scientist. I'm not a doctor. I'm just an individual. But what I have learned from both carnivore and fasting is I feel like it's just a return to what is natural for humans. Initially, I was going to do this documentary is let's do a carnivore diet documentary. And then later I realized the reason I'm so healthy and so successful in healing everything is really I've returned to what's natural for humans. And I think most of humanity has gotten so far away from that. And I believe that throughout mankind, like my ancestors would have been maybe hunting a big animal in the woods and then maybe fasting for 4 or 5 days to like get another one. This thing where we just have food at our fingertips, 60,000 products in the grocery store. I can go on my phone right now and click a button, have food here, is completely unnatural. It seems natural to us because it's the only thing I've known my whole life. But if you look at the grand scheme of things, it isn't. And so, I'm a huge proponent of fasting. I do it regularly now. I'm almost trying to work it in where I can do it sort of randomly, like our ancestors would have. I think it's great to do
Yeah.
either way, but just naturally on carnivore, I've pretty much been fasting for 600 days now because it's usually 2 meals a day, if not one
Mm.
meal a day, and then maybe 16 or even 23 hours where I'm not eating. I just eat through that 1 hour window.
Yeah, you're 100% right. Our ancestors they underwent feast famine cycling. So, they didn't have the refrigerator in the pantry, so they had to have a good hunt or a good harvest, and there were often times where you were unsuccessful in the hunt and there was no harvest, right? And so there were a lot of times of fasting, and instead of getting weaker, we release a lot of growth hormone, human growth hormone, which helps preserve your lean body mass. You also can release more endorphins, for example. And all of that can help increase strength. Actually, testosterone can go up. So it can increase strength. So a lot of people just feel euphoric. The ketones, the elevation in the ketones makes your brain come alive, right? And kind of takes your brain to a whole new level. And that's why, in a lot of religious communities, they'll fast and they feel like they have better intuition, that they hear, from God more effectively. And when we look at it from a physiological perspective, we see those ketones being elevated. The balance between the GABA glutamate ratio in the brain increases in dopamine and endorphins and things like that. That can have really profound effects on the way that you think, the way that your physiology adapts and performs, and so it is really remarkable. And with that carnivore diet, your blood sugar is so stable, right? It's such a blood sugar stabilizing diet. It's one of the key principles I talk about is prioritizing protein. Of course, a carnivore diet, it's a high protein diet. So when you're eating protein, healthy fats, and therefore you're getting very good blood sugar stability. And blood sugar instability is one of the biggest stressors on the body. And so when you eliminate that stressor, your body is better able to adapt to the other stressors that you face in life. And so you become more resilient in general. So yeah, really profound stuff there. And now obviously you've had this remarkable transformation, and now you've put together this documentary. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, so around day 67 on my carnivore journey, I said, there's so many people talking about carnivore on YouTube that I've discovered, but this is just such a small subset of people, and I think this could really help others. In particular, for me, it was the depression and anxiety. I was clinically suicidally depressed. It was the worst depression in the world. And I was on every medication for it. They'd say, try this for 3 months, see if it works. And then it never worked. And then they would up the dosage. I know medication works for some people, but for me, I did it for years and years and it never worked. And when I found healing through this, and I was so hopeless at one point in my life, it just tears me up to think about what my children and my wife had to go through with their dad is just a
Mm.
zombie, always sad, always depressed on a couch. There's so many people in the world that are hopeless. I wanted to get the word out to them. So I'm like, we should do a documentary. Uh, I mentioned earlier, I learned about the ketogenic diet through a documentary on Netflix. So that was kind of a little seed in my brain. Like maybe we could reach more
Mm.
people besides just YouTube. And I kind of foolishly like, let's just do a documentary, even though I've never done one before. I've done a lot of video on YouTube work. And the point of the documentary was let's not get into all of the science and arguments about a ketogenic carnivore diet. There's a lot of documentaries on ketogenic diets to talk about the science. We're going to cover that. But what I really want to cover is the individual stories, because I believe that's what will inspire other people. And I was hearing so many stories similar to mine. Like I said, people that are older, younger, all sorts of health issues too. Type 2 diabetes, fertility issues. It's just, we have a woman that we interviewed in our documentary that was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and she had a full-blown stroke. She could barely walk. She was bedridden, and she's about to hike the 500-mile St. Francis of Assisi Trail. She's been doing carnivore for like 2 years now. And all this is in her medical records that we've all verified. Some of these things you hear are just incredible. It's amazing how the human body will heal. But yeah, around day 67, I decided let's do this documentary. And oh, one other thing that happened to me real quick in terms of my healing, I mentioned the congestive heart failure and the irregular heartbeat. About a year into carnivore, I'm like, I feel so good. I had symptoms for my congestive heart failure. I'd stand up, I'd get dizzy, I was always fatigued. I felt like I could run a marathon around year one on carnivore. So I went back to the doctor to get my heart echo done and just to see, like, they told me when I was diagnosed with congestive heart failure, this is chronic. It's never going to improve. You're lucky if you could keep it the same, but it may get worse. It's a chronic thing that you have. They gave me medication for it. Long story short, year one, I went in, they checked my congestive heart failure. Ejection fraction was 44. It was 65. It was completely, which is completely normal. It completely reversed normal, which is just blows my mind. It's sort of uncharted territory, right? Most people diagnosed with congestive heart failure aren't going to only eat meat.
Hmm.
So there's not a lot of studies or science
Yeah.
or even anecdotal experiences because most people wouldn't do what I did. But the other thing that really blows my mind is my lifelong, highly erratic, irregular heartbeat is completely normal 1 year later. And by the way, just for those listening, all of this is in my medical records. I've shared it all on my channel. I'm happy to share it all again because some people are like, that's impossible. Like, how could that even happen? I was born with an irregular, erratic heartbeat. It's perfectly normal right now. It's in all of my notes and everything. I've since interviewed so many people for our documentary, including heart surgeon Dr. Philip Ovadia. I'm like, how is this even possible? And he's like, well, the heart performs much more efficiently while in ketosis. You don't have inflammation anymore. You lost the weight, so that's going to help as well. So inflammation's drastically reduced on a carnivore diet. You're getting more electrolytes, magnesium, sodium, things like that that may be affecting it as well. But he's also like, it is sort of uncharted territory. We don't have a lot of people doing it yet. Um, but yeah, so I got really passionate. Let's do this documentary. We started interviewing people all over the world. The first person we interviewed was a man named Bill Knott. He was 700 pounds, stuck in his house in Alaska for 5 years. He was too big to leave his house. Hadn't left his house in 5 years. Horribly, horribly depressed. He just had this black hole depression. He saw one of my YouTube videos. He sent me this essay and he said, I'm going to be dead if I don't do something. I think I could do carnivore, but meat in Alaska is expensive. I don't have money. He's like, maybe I could do a YouTube channel, earn a little bit of money to pay for the meat. And I ended up connecting with him and we flew out to Alaska. He's the first person we filmed for our documentary. This is about a little over a year ago. And fast forward now, he's become a good friend of mine. He does his own YouTube channel. We were able to raise money so he could get the meat. About 3 weeks into carnivore, he called me. He's like, Kerry, this is amazing. He said, this back pain and knee pain I've had for 30 years is gone. 3 weeks in. And he's like, and I
Hmm.
feel like my mood is so much better. He's like, how is that even possible, Kerry? I'm like, inflammation, Bill. Your inflammation's going away because you're not eating those highly inflammatory foods anymore. And fast forward, we just went to film him about 2 months ago at his 1 year later. That was the premise of the documentary. Let's follow a couple people that have severe health issues, not just obesity, type 2 diabetes, depression, all sorts of issues, follow them for a year. So we checked in with Bill a year later. He's down 270 pounds.
Wow.
He's no longer depressed. He can stand up straight. He couldn't even stand up straight before. He was hunched over like a hunchback because his back hurts so bad and he slept that way. And he's outside in the beauty of Alaska for the first time in 5 years. It's just incredible. So we filmed 34 individuals and doctors like Bill. We've also filmed Dr. Ken Berry, Dr. Anthony Chafee. We went to Boston College because cancer is a big part of our
Hmm.
documentary. Professor Seafried has been talking
Yeah.
about cancer as a metabolic disease for about 30 years now. He's done some incredible work. So we interviewed him and his whole team. And yeah, we're traveling around. We're wrapping up in January, we're going to be at the Jordan and Tammy Peterson house. We're going to be filming Tammy Peterson. She had stage 4 cancer and was carnivore. The whole family, as some may be aware, are carnivore. Dr. Jordan Peterson and his daughter as well. That's going to be one of our final interviews, and then we're hoping to wrap up the documentary and launch it middle of next year.
Yeah, you're doing a great work there, really, really showing how people can change their lifestyle and see dramatic change in their health. And so many people think, or they're told by their doctors, oh, you have this genetic condition, you have, whatever it is, here, take this medication, and then take these medications to cover up the side effects of the other medication. And other lifestyle issues. And so you're really giving hope. And unfortunately, you're doing a lot more than unfortunately, what most conventional doctors are doing, because they're not giving hope, unfortunately. And they're not, and it's because they're not seeing results, because they're not addressing root cause factors such as diet. And so you're doing really great work as far as that goes. And I want everybody to know, I mean, carnivore diet, of course, is controversial in that natural health space. And I don't believe that carnivore diet's the right diet for everybody. And I don't think you do either, but it works for many people, right? And so, and obviously, it's given people's lives back. And I think in the natural health world, people just jump into too much dogma. Sometimes we learn things like, like meat is bad for your heart, right? Or saturated fat or this or that. And that you need to be a plant-based diet and this and that. But really, I mean, I think one thing that everybody, at least everybody in the natural health space agrees on, is get rid of those ultra processed foods, get rid of the seed oils, the corn, safflower, soybean oil, all those kind of refined vegetable oils. And then do your best to try to remove as much toxins as possible. So you want to go as organic as possible. You're going to get more nutrients, less toxins when you try to go as organic as possible. It can be really hard to go 100% organic, but the more that you can shift in that direction, getting organic or growing your own or using a local farmer for meat or whatever it is, the better off you're going to be. And then you kind of want to experiment and find out, okay, do you do well on lots of plant foods? Do you do better on less plant foods? Maybe pushed all the way into the carnivore space, right? And see if you feel great, just like Kerry has, and many of the people he's talked about. So you can experiment. None of these things are gonna. When you take out the processed foods, the food should really be healing your body, right? And so when you eat, you should see feedback, right? And you should notice, okay, I feel a lot better when I'm doing this. And then none of those diets are necessarily dangerous for you. So you can experiment. You can do, a 2-3 week experiment, with the amount of plant-based foods and see what you feel better with. Less, right? Moderate amount or more, right? And kind of see and go from there. I think that's really key. It's called personalized nutrition, rather than dogmatic nutrition. And I think, that's what we have to come in with that mindset and then experiment from there. And there's all these N equals 1, right? Or this individual will see great results finding the right diet for themselves.
Right. I appreciate everything you're saying there. I love what you said about doctors sometimes just saying, well, it's a fluke or it's genetic. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that lead a lot of people to suffering, myself included, because, for example, I have a close family member has type 2 diabetes, and in his head, this is just there's something wrong with me. There's just something wrong with the way my body processes carbohydrates. When in reality, I believe with every fiber of my body, the truth is he's just consuming an excessive amount of carbohydrates, perpetuating that
Mm.
problem. But because he's told, oh, we don't know, this is just a fluke, this is just a genetic thing, he continues to try to moderate eating these carbohydrates and things while checking his continuous glucose monitors. I'm sitting there eating like the cleanest a human could possibly eat while he's like, well, I can have a little Pepsi, I can have a little birthday cake. But that whole fluke thing drives me insane. I think it's a dangerous thing. About the doctors, I really appreciate your nice words about giving people hope and finding healing. That has been the most incredible thing here. And this isn't me patting myself on the back, but just lately it's been happening more and more. I had a woman come on my channel and she said, Kerry, I found healing through your videos, through your inspiration doing a carnivore diet. She had an advanced autoimmune disorder that she was using a cane. She could barely walk. She said, I owe you my walking. And I'm like, what do I even say to that? It's just insane.
Mm.
And then on the flip side, it kind of makes me mad when I take a big step back and think about it that this YouTuber that does homesteading YouTube videos was the only way this individual was able to find healing. Like what does that say about how broken our system is now in this day and age? It's
100%, because the doctors should be seeing that, right? We should be seeing that all the time.
yeah,
And the reality is that most doctors never see that. And that's because, again, they're not addressing root cause factors. And you're
right,
giving people hope. And it's something simple as, I mean, it's simple, but it's not easy, right? Because lifestyle
right.
change in general, you got to have the right mindset. You got to have a growth mindset, committed mindset to make the lifestyle change. But it really is simple when you actually break it down. You take out kind of the emotions that we have around food and you just kind of simplify it from there. Okay, you just make these swaps and these changes, and it's actually a simple process.
Yeah, the way I wrap my brain around it when people hear that I'm doing carnivore is I just said it's an elimination diet.
Hmm.
I'm not going to eat sugar, seed oils, processed garbage for 30 days. I'm going to see how I feel. Ultimately, that kind of left me with meat. Now, as you said earlier, there's vegetables, there's plants, you eat organic, things like that. But for me, I did that before and I was still suffering. People tell me this all the time. They're like, if you would have just gotten rid of the sugar and the junk, you would have healed the same way as you did on carnivore. And maybe that's true for some people, but I got to tell the truth. And that wasn't true for me because I did that. I did a strict plant-based ketogenic diet where I'd have a salad for lunch, salad for dinner, really clean, no processed anything, just a little tiny bit of protein. It seemed like for me, I feel like I was deficient in cholesterol or fatty meat. Like my hormones balanced when I got that back in my body. As you said, though, everyone's different. One thing interesting though, like I said, I'm not telling everyone to eat a carnivore diet. What I'm advocating for is returning to what is natural. And
Hmm.
I think most of us have escaped from what's natural through the foods we're eating. And I think it's gotten so far away that sadly it's kind of sobering. But in many cases, I believe that a lot of these plants and fruits are still bad, are worse for us than we believe when you take into account the pesticides, the glyphosate. Even if you're eating
Hmm.
organic, they've done tests. 60% of organic kale, for example, has glyphosate on it. One of the things I've been exploring more recently, and the person that I'm talking to specializes in gut biome, gut bacteria. And what she tells me is it's kind of like the ocean. We understand like 4% of it. It's kind of like the human brain. We understand very little. But there's some beliefs going around right now that maybe the reason I'm so successful on this proper human diet, carnivore diet, is due to the gut bacteria, gut biome, balancing it back out. And when we're eating these plants and vegetables or other processed foods, cereal, for example, anytime you eat a bowl of cereal, you're ingesting glyphosate. She was teaching me, I didn't realize this till recently, glyphosate's just an antibiotic. So
Hmm.
when you look at humanity, most of humanity is ingesting a little bit of glyphosate all the time, chronically, for a long period of time, which is like taking antibiotics for years and years and decades, wondering what that does to our gut biome, our gut bacteria, which then feeds into our hormones and our immune system. And it was like Hippocrates said, all disease begins in the gut. I think a lot of that's gut bacteria, but sorry, I'm getting off on a tangent, but that's something we're
No, you're
exploring more that I just
100%
find
right.
fascinating.
You're 100% right. And really the mechanism, and this is really interesting stuff that I've been studying quite a bit. And the mechanism is that the mitochondria within the intestinal cells becomes poisoned by toxins. And those toxins could be endotoxins coming from bad bacteria, an overgrowth of bacteria that shouldn't be in there. Of course, there's also toxins coming from glyphosate, coming from pesticides, herbicides, coming from heavy metals, all different types of things that we're being exposed to, molds and mycotoxins. But all of those things, and blood sugar imbalance is also is a factor. That's actually can be really damaging to the body as well. All of that poisons the mitochondria in the intestinal cells. And when the mitochondria are not functioning well, these cells can't produce energy effectively in what we call aerobic respiration. And so they become dependent upon glycolysis, breakdown of glucose produces quick energy, but it's dirty fuel, a lot of oxidative stress in the cell. We get all these senescent mitochondria and senescent cells in the intestines, and then they can't pull oxygen out of for producing energy. Normally, the mitochondria are producing are I'm sorry, not producing, but they are using oxygen and in order to produce cellular energy. And so when they can't do that, it leaves extra oxygen in the intestinal lumen. And in the intestinal lumen, it should be very, very, very low oxygen, specifically as you get further along into the small intestine and into the large intestine, should be very low oxygen. When there's higher oxygen levels, it results in an increase in aerobic bacteria. And those aerobic bacteria tend to be histamine producers. They tend to be, like that's where you get salmonella, citrobacter, a lot of these kind of known pathogens are associated with these aerobic bacteria. They should be in very small, very, very minute, small quantities. And when they start to overgrow because of the increased oxygen that's there, they start producing more toxins and it becomes a vicious cycle. And so basically, what you did was through blood sugar stability, getting optimal nutrients, lowering your toxic load, which you didn't necessarily know you were doing this. You were just change your diet. Um, but by doing that, and then the blood sugar stability allowed you to fast, which that's a natural mechanism for breaking down the damaged mitochondria, what we call mitophagy, and then taking the raw materials and recycling them and producing new healthy mitochondria in those intestinal cells. Now that mitochondria can suck the oxygen out of the intestinal lumen, which therefore creates an environment where those pathogens can't thrive, right? And so they die down. And now that creates diversity in the microbiome because they were stealing nutrients from good microbes, right? And then you have secondary feeders like Akkermansia muciniphila, which is your keystone bacteria, they call, because it's associated with lower rates of all forms of metabolic and chronic inflammatory disease. And it lives in the deep part of the mucosa in the gut. And so now that's able to eat the mucosa, it produces something called urolithin A, which stimulates more mitophagy in the mitochondria. And you get kind of this overall improved diversity in the gut microbiome by doing that. And therefore, you're going to get a lot of great positive health benefits from that. and that's what you experience. That's kind of more of the physiology of science of that.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. I've been buying books and trying to learn more on this because again, I'm just an individual. I think that's why some people enjoy listening to my content. I always say I'm not a doctor. You guys got to do your own research and go to the doctors for this stuff. But the more I'm learning, it is really fascinating. And when you're talking about mitochondria damage, that's what I learned a lot from Professor Seafried, which can lead to cancer. Chronic inflammation, systemic inflammation can lead to damage of the mitochondria, which can lead to cancer. That was one of my big epiphanies later on in the documentary. It's like, I believe that most people in the world are chronically inflamed from the foods we're eating, that we shouldn't be eating. That's not to say you
Mm-hmm.
can't get cancer from other reasons, but I have a feeling this is something I'm exploring more. I'm talking to Professor Seafried and others about, but it's my gut feeling that most of the cancers in the world nowadays are from the foods we're eating because we're chronically inflamed for years and years and decades. Earlier generations, that might have been smoking, but it seems like now, given this day and age, with all the processed foods people are eating more and more, that seems to be the case. So that's my other reason. I've healed all of these things doing a carnivore diet for myself. So a lot of people are like, well, why don't you just go back to moderation or something else? I'm looking at the long term. I believe my odds of getting some of these diseases like cancer or dementia or Alzheimer's, a lot of them seem to be rooted in systemic chronic inflammation for years and years or decades and decades. And I just feel better too. So I'm like, why would I why would I mess with it? Don't fix what's not broken sort of thing. So I plan to just continue doing this for the rest of my life unless something changes.
Yeah, for sure. And you have the philosophy of like not necessarily, I'm sure you enjoy what you eat, but your primary focus with food is not pleasure, it's performance.
Yes, it's so interesting you said that. I think it was maybe 90 days into carnivore. I don't know when it was, but this switch went off where it's like, you know what? I'm just eating for sustenance now, um, not entertainment. It was almost an
Mm.
addiction or entertainment before. It was always, what are we going to eat? What are we going to eat? What's the next meal? Oh, we're going to a birthday party. What are they going to have? Let's go out for dinner. I don't do that anymore. Now, don't get me wrong. I really appreciate really good ribeye. I
Yeah.
love it. It puts a big smile on my face, but it's not an addiction like it
Mm.
used to be. That's the thing that's so incredible with all of this. Because when I started doing carnivore, a lot of family and friends, they're like, here he goes, another crazy fad diet. He did keto. He did one meal a day. He did Weight Watchers. Oh, this one's going to work. But my argument in retrospect to those people are this is the most natural thing I've ever done. I'm not, it sounds crazy to the outsider. It would have sounded crazy to me when I was addicted to the standard American diet and eating all that variety of stuff. But it's the most natural thing. I don't even think about eating. I sometimes I forget to eat. It's not forced in every one of those other diets, Weight Watchers, counting calories, all of that stuff. It always felt forced and temporary. Like I just got to get through this and drop these pounds and then I can go back.
Mm.
That has been the biggest game changer. The word natural has been the biggest changer for me. It feels natural to me. Everything feels so much more natural. And I've heard other people make the argument, which I always think is very interesting. And I don't know, everyone's different. There's a spectrum, like you said, but there's millions of species on this planet. Every species has sort of its natural diet, like a cow eats grass, a koala bear eats eucalyptus. It's only humans that are eating just 60,000 products
Mm.
in the grocery store. I laugh sometimes now. I used to do it. I used to fill my cart up with all those things. You go down the ketchup aisle in the grocery store and there's 65 types of ketchup. Like, do I really need to choose 65 types of ketchup or 1,000 different beverages? And meanwhile, like every other species, they have like basically this one or two things that they eat. And every other species is thriving and
Mm.
not having these crazy rates of cancer, obesity. What is it, like 90% of humans walking around have poor metabolic health? People are arthritic. And the thing that got me really passionate for the documentary was hopeless people with depression and anxiety, like myself, but more so now, it's this next generation. I look at my daughters, my wife and I have triplets plus one, the triplets are 17. They're all eating a proper human diet. Most of them carnivore, one of them's kind of keto. They're thriving. But when I look at their peers, they're walking around with Starbucks. It's just full of
Mm.
sugar. And I'm looking at some of these stats. It's heartbreaking. It's like kids getting type 2 diabetes in their teenage years or whatever. That used to be unheard of. And now they're depression, anxiety, all the learning disorders and health issues that go on into their adult years. I feel like it's way worse of a problem than we realize because it happens slowly over time and we normalize it. I ate pretty bad growing up to get me to the level of sickness where I just showed you my 15 medications and all of those issues. But this next generation is eating way worse than even I was with this ultra processed food dyes, seed oils, toxins, metals, all of this stuff. I just have a feeling it's going to come down pretty hard pretty quickly. It's just crazy what's
Yeah.
going on out there.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. And you're talking about the other species. Well, when humans start to domesticate these species and feed them processed foods, they get sick too. In fact, yeah, I mean, most dogs, most of the pets out there are on highly processed diets that are not right for their species type, and they end up getting chronic disease. And my wife and I, our family, we just adopted a dog from my mother-in-law, right? And unfortunately, she was feeding him, processed foods, right? And so he was on anxiety medication for 6 years, a dog, right?
Wow.
And so we're like, we adopted him because she's just like, I don't really want to take care of him anymore. Can you guys take him? And we have young kids that one of my daughters just absolutely like. She makes a pet out of every animal that's around our house. So we're like, okay, I guess we need to get one. So we'll get a dog. So we're feeding him, meat, right? 100% meat, right? Natural
Yes.
diet, right? And we kind of weaned him. He was on a processed diet, so we gradually weaned him, and then we went from fully cooking the meat, and then gradually into more of a raw meat diet, which is natural, right? Because
Yes.
dogs don't make fires, right? So,
Right.
and he loves and the taste of it. He loves it just the same, right? Whether it's raw or cooked. And so, immediately, we got him off the anxiety medication after we weaned him down after like 2 weeks or so. He's doing great. No issues. He used to bark at night when, that was why they started him on the anxiety medication. He would get scared and bark at night. And so his brain's doing better, right? And he's functioning better. And so it's kind of the same thing. I mean, there's so many domesticated animals now that are on processed diets. So we really need to get people on those species appropriate diets, like you were talking about, finding the
Yeah.
right diet for you, following those principles like I talked about. I think that's so key. Let's finish up with like what you talked about your carnivore diet. What are kind of your go-to foods? What are you eating on a regular basis?
Yeah, so I try to stick to grass-fed, grass-finished beef, and I do better on beef than pork or
Mm,
chicken. But when I started carnivore, I did beef, butter, bacon, eggs, chicken, fish, all animal products. Yeah, and that's basically been it. But then I later evolved to where for probably 3 or 4 months I did, they call it lion diet. It's just ruminant animal. For me, it was just beef, any animal with a multi-chamber stomach. And the reason for that is because if the animal is ingesting grains or some
mm,
things that have glyphosate in it or chemicals, a lot of that is broken down or filtered out by the time that goes through that animal's digestive system. And so some people that have these really severe issues, like Michaela Peterson, she'll only eat ruminant animal meat or lion
yeah.
diet. I don't have that severe of issues, but I did find I felt a lot better just eating meat. So that's kind of been my go-to. And my
Yeah, in a
dogs
sense,
too.
you're eating your vegetables because the cow ate grass, right? And
Right.
that's what made all these powerful nutrients within it. And now you're eating that just in a form that your body can digest and process in a much more
Yeah.
effective manner.
100%. Yeah. So I feel like if I'm eating grass-fed, grass-finished meat, this is kind of a sobering reality, but I feel like that's the cleanest humans can eat given the options. I would put
Hmm.
fruits and vegetables next, like you mentioned, but I believe there's a caveat there that people need to be aware of with the pesticides and the plant
Mm.
toxins and the glyphosate and the fact that a lot of produce, I've learned this recently. We interviewed a woman, rancher Maggie. She's been eating carnivore for 65 years. She's 83 years old. She's flexing on camera. She's got full blonde hair. She's incredible. We filmed her for about a week for our longevity segment. But she's been ranching forever, and she pointed out that a lot of the soil of the earth is diminished in terms of minerals and nutrients. And when you plant a seed in there, you're going to get what was in the soil. And so you may get a carrot. And it looks like a great healthy carrot because they put fertilizer on there, but it has a lot less nutrients than it would have 50 years ago. So when I take all of those things into account and all the different types of meat and animals I can eat, I feel like ruminant meat, grass fed, grass finished. I buy it locally from my neighbor. I see the cows, they're out grazing in a natural field, is the cleanest I can get given the options that we have, especially in terms of healing. My dogs are also carnivore. Just real quick, I want to mention that's awesome that you're doing that with your dogs. It took me a while to get my dogs on carnivore. They're thriving. Like they're like puppies again. They're running around
Hmm.
outside. I get people that say to me too, they're like, "You mean you feed your dogs raw meat?" And just like you, I'm like, what do you think they would have done in nature? Like caught a
Yeah.
squirrel and made a fire and cooked it. And they're thriving. And so your dog was on anxiety medicine. I've got a really close friend of the family, and their dog right now, I didn't even know this was possible for dogs. I knew it was for humans. Their dog has diabetes and they give it insulin. I'm
Hmm.
like, just feed it meat. Like, stop.
Exactly.
Literally, the dog food is processed. It's almost like, I believe cereal is like dog food for humans. It's just ultra
Yeah.
processed garbage you're giving these dogs. It's just give them meat. We have found giving our dogs meat, it's almost the same price or not less expensive if you get a
Hmm.
decent kibble. We give them chicken thighs and we grind them up,
Hmm.
and that's it. And you get them
Yeah.
on sale for like 70 cents a pound or something. When you price it out basis the kibble, it's cheaper. And then when you look at it, they don't need medication. They're going to live longer. They're thriving. My dog was limping and he was always like wheezing, almost like he had asthma. It both went away. And he's got like nonstop zoomies just running around right now on meat. And it seems so surprising, but it shouldn't because he's just eating his natural diet. That's what he was intended to eat. When humans eat their natural diet, when animals eat their natural diet, it's amazing what happens. Most people, I think, are walking around in this brain fog and they can't really see things clearly until they get out of that brain fog and they just sort of normalize feeling bad their entire lives. No other species feels bad like that. They just
Hmm.
feel natural.
100%, Carrie. I mean, we were made to thrive. We just have to remove the interference, right? And right now what's interfering with us is terrible lifestyle habits, toxins in, everything that we're doing, particularly the foods that we're eating, water that we're drinking, in some cases the air that we're breathing. Hard to control the air. You can get an air purifier, you can get a water purifier, and that's probably the best thing you can do there, to get outside more, right? But we focus a lot on nutrition because nutrition is a huge lever, right, when it comes to your overall health. And it's the conscious choices you're making about nobody's forcing things in your mouth, right? You're not a baby. And so it's conscious decisions you're making about what you're putting in your body on a regular basis. But you know what? All of us, when we're making lifestyle changes, we need inspiration. And that's what's great about your movie. So you can check out Carrie's movie. Healinghumanity.movie is the best website. And it's called Healing Humanity, the Power of a Proper Human Diet. You'll follow all those stories and really be inspired. So a lot of the stuff we talked about is common sense. And like I said, it's really simple, but it's not easy if you're accustomed to, a certain way of life, if you got family members and other social pressures. And that's where watching a movie like this will really help inspire you and give you the momentum, right? And give you the kind of the emotional charge to really make these changes and see the physiological changes, the healing results in your own life. Any last words of inspiration for us here, Carrie?
I think the last thing I'll say is just keep it simple. You see all of these doctors online and they're doing so much great work like you. And I think for the individual like myself, sometimes it can be overwhelming when we're talking about metabolism, mitochondria. The simplest thing that I have learned, and it's so simple, is just return to what is natural. What are you doing that is natural? What are you doing that is unnatural? The further away you get from natural, the sicker you get. And the best way you can do that is through your nutrition and diet, but also getting exercise, getting fresh air, getting sunshine, getting out there, not just staring at a screen all day. It's amazing what will happen to your health when you return to what is natural.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Carrie. Appreciate all the great work you're doing. Looking forward to seeing this documentary. Be blessed.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.